Hey everyone, welcome to Coffee with Changemakers. I'm Robin.
And I'm Yoshi. On the Coffee with Changemakers podcast, we explore the stories of changemakers taking on some of today's biggest social and environmental challenges.
Every episode, we host an intimate conversation on social impact and leadership, where we listen, learn, and connect over a cup of coffee with inspiring guests from all over the world.
So before we jump into today's episode, we have a quick ask. If you enjoy our conversations, it would mean the world to us if you subscribe, rate, and perhaps even tell a friend about the show. Your support helps us bring even more inspiring guests onto future episodes.
So, here's today's coffee chat. Enjoy.
All right, well, welcome to Coffee with Changemakers. So today we're thrilled to have Riki Yamauchi joining us. So Riki is a director at Novastar Ventures, an Africa-focused global venture capital firm working out of the vibrant entrepreneurial hubs of Lagos, London, and Nairobi. So Novastar is on a mission to partner with gritty optimists to build businesses that transform markets and create enduring value, not just for the few, but for the many, and not just for today, but for future generations. So Riki's work sits at the intersection of African innovation, climate resilience, impact, and also sustainability. And he brings a wealth of experience driving positive change across markets. I'm excited to talk to him about his journey, the transformative work that Novastar is leading, and his insights on building a more equitable and sustainable future. Riki, welcome to the podcast. It's awesome to have you here.
Thank you, Son. Again, that's much better than I could ever do. So thank you for the kind intro.
Of course, man, of course. But
pleasure.
You deserve all of it and even more. So for our audience who may not know you yet, could you maybe start off by just, sharing a little bit about your childhood, where you grew up, and all that good stuff?
Yeah, thank you for having me. And it's a pleasure to be here. Just a quick intro. Again, my name is Riki Yamauchi. I was second generation Japanese American, so born and raised in California, Los Angeles, and spent until high school graduation, spent time in LA. I then kind of came back. For the first time, lived in Japan for college, where I went to Waseda University.
Nice.
So that was kind of reverse cultural shock moment for me that I think a lot of people, like your audiences, might have similar experiences. Growing up in the U.S., naturally kind of interested in the world of finance. And 2013, I joined Morgan Stanley, first year in the Japan office. And since then, I've been at Morgan Stanley, also JP Morgan, where we met.
Yep.
Your son, you're my senpai.
That's right.
During that time, and spent about 8 years in that industry, primarily focusing on equity, so institutional equity sales, and also research, where I did a lot of technology research.
Wow.
During the time when iPhone was a hot topic
That's right.
in the market.
That's right.
So good days for Japan. And I had a early midlife crisis. We could touch on this later, but when I was hitting 30, so 2020 when COVID hit, decided that I wanted to use the experience and finance for the good, for the many, and left Morgan Stanley to start going to Africa.
Wow.
And making small investments with friends on my own, and kind of had a 2-year of kind of soul searching. And the past 2 years, I was able to really joint forces with Novastar, as you kindly introduced, is one of the first institutional venture capital and the largest in Africa.
Wow.
And I joined them more than a year ago. And then since then, we were able to mobilize about $100 million from Japan to Africa.
Okay.
And now we're really excited to go on this journey of supporting entrepreneurship and really addressing the mass market, the
Right.
critical mass. So not the wealthy few, but
Right.
the many, as you alluded to.
Right.
And yeah, so that's a little bit of background and where we're at.
Nice. Awesome, man. Well, so for some of our listeners who may not know, too much about the financial world or may not know too much about like venture capital, right?
Yeah.
in very simple terms, like what is venture capital? What do you guys do? It sounds really sexy, but like what do you guys actually do?
No, that's a good question, and I'm figuring it out. I realized that like doing investment banking, capital markets in Japan and in a global bank, and going to VC in Africa is like the extreme of both side of finance. I think the first part is the traditional finance. A lot of it was, driven by Western capitalism. And I really feel that my 20s learning about finance was a really good experience for me. What was difficult was the transitioning to VC because it's much harder to unlearn things than learning things. When I left traditional finance to go to VC, it was like it looked like a chaos. Like there's no market. It's much more kind of it's more of a art than science. The beauty of VC, I think, kind of looking even back to Silicon Valley, is that if you're publicly traded, like a stock, you're exposed to markets, hedge funds who's going to buy today and sell in a heartbeat just to make profit. That's their job. And our job was to serve those affluent people for the wealthy to become wealthier. And I think as we all know that, that short-term profit-seeking investment worked to move capital around.
Right.
But at the same time, we realized a lot of the climate issues, emerging market, like development economy issues, COVID. So I think there was that realization. And then for me, the beauty of venture capital is that you could do more longer term.
I see.
These investments are typically the fund is 10 years. And now, like, I think VCs are now being criticized because even 10 years is too short to solve the biggest issues in the world. So now we're seeing funds that are more, 14 years, 18 years, or, kind of open-ended ones as well.
That's right.
So I think the venture capital market is evolving, but for me, the beauty of venture capital has and should continue to be the fact that you could support entrepreneurs that are visionaries and really trying to solve the most difficult issues for our generations and the future ones.
Nice.
So I hope that was a little bit of my take on venture capital.
Awesome. No, that's really cool, man. I mean, like, I think somebody like you who kind of, grew up in all over the place, but spent a significant time in Tokyo, all of a sudden deciding to uproot and then go to Africa. Like, what is it about that continent that attracted you, because I think you're one of the very, very few, if not like the only Japanese, venture capitalist that's working for a global firm that's focused on Africa right now.
Yeah, thank you. I think there's some like Japanese VCs, in Africa active, but you're right. I think a lot of the interest in Africa has been more like development, aid, ODA. So there's a lot of people who are from like trading houses, Shosha, or consulting, or like government, JICA. There was really no one really from pure finance. So for me, I didn't want to go to Africa kind of feeling sorry for them. I just thought this is a last like final like growth engine on the planet.
Interesting.
And this continent's going to grow and make up 1/4 or 1/3 of the population Earth of Earth by 2050 or 2100.
Wow.
But when it grows, if it doesn't grow sustainably, it's gonna grow like in a destructive way. So for me, and I think with Novastar, we're all aligned, but how do we crack that growth in a more sustainable fashion? Things that we can't do in the global north, we thought would be happening in the global south. And we're seeing that, and we're backing those type of businesses. So I thought Africa interested me not because kind of that development, but we were able to use finance for, that's more aligned with our values. And it's hard to do that in the developed economies, where it's more kind of closer to heart when we do VC in Africa, I feel.
Interesting.
And I think the VC ecosystem in Africa is pretty nascent. So our fund started in 2014, and we were one of the first institutional VC when we had 80 million.
Oh, wow.
The market was only about 100.
Oh, wow.
So one fund is making up a pretty chunky amount. But since then, it grew to the peak at about 6 billion in 2021. Obviously, that was a bubble in the ZERP negative interest rate environment. So that
Yep.
was a bubble.
Yep.
And this year we're about 3.5 billion.
Wow.
So the market has grown since we started 10 years ago
crazy.
about 35 times.
Wow.
So it's still the beginning.
Exciting times to be in.
I hope so.
And you're at the forefront of all of that. So very, very cool, man. Wow. So, for say if somebody wants to, get into venture capital, what would you advise them to do? If one of our listeners wanting to, break into this space.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's a tough industry.
Yeah.
It's so unique. Japan's very unique. Japan's like very, very CBC weighted. So these are like generalists,
Yep.
like sarariman, typically coming to do that for like a year, then like rotate out. I think VC is a very specialist occupation,
Yep.
not a generalist. In Africa, we encourage, and I think a lot of our team is our ex-entrepreneurs. People who knows entrepreneurship, people who have built their own businesses, understand the struggles and the hardship,
Yep.
should be the ones who are in the position now to support as an investor.
Cool.
How to get into venture capital, I think, like yourself, Yoshi-san, but like try to start your own businesses is probably a pretty, we support that process rather than coming from traditional finance. Like, just because you come from Goldman or
Yeah.
Morgan doesn't mean that you'll succeed as a venture capitalist necessarily.
Interesting. So in terms of like impact measurement, there's a lot of talk in the space right now, right? How can we make sure that the startups that you're investing in are actually creating tangible impact?
Yeah.
Like, could you maybe enlighten us a little bit about what Novastar does to measure that impact?
Yeah, thank you. Now, you're right. I think in Japan, there's a lot of, talks
Yes.
and, commitments about impact and SDGs,
Yep.
and shouts out to all the SDG bads people
That's the badge,
in Otemachi.
Exactly.
But yeah, it feels weird when we talk so much about this for like the past 10 years and not really checking, are we doing the right thing? It's not easy to do it in the third successful economy in the world. So we've been pretty privileged to kind of start the fund with that already in the DNA.
Cool.
So how do we kind of make sure that the impact is in place? We are signed up to a lot of the global impact measurements frameworks.
Nice.
So the PRIs
Yep.
and OPIM,
Yep.
etc. And a lot of our LP investors who are investing into our funds are international organizations, like
see.
the UK government or, the French government,
see.
the US government, which means that they're also part of like the global impact investing network, right? GIN.
Gotcha.
So when they invest into us, from day one, we're already expected to report our not just financial returns, but also impact
Wow.
returns. So that's why we feel that in Africa, not all the funds are doing this, but we feel that it's the right market, perhaps like fit for purpose wise, to really kind of push for that impact kind of measurements and the frameworks. And for us, because we are an active investor, we usually are one of the first institutional VCs to invest into startups. And we are taking kind of board seats most of the time,
Cool.
which means that we can help them incorporate their ESG practices
Nice.
to help them get to the next stage, like Series A, Series B, so
Nice.
that they're able to attract more global investors.
Wow.
So for us, one of the key kind of benchmarks we look at, or KPI, is for every dollar amount, how much are we able to capitalize or mobilize into the companies that we support? And I think right now it's like about for every dollar we've been able to mobilize about $5.
Oh, nice.
So,
Wow.
I mean, that number is constantly changing.
Right.
But we're pretty focused on kind of making sure that it's not just us,
Yep.
but we're able to bring much more.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, so talking about startups, like, from a venture capitalist perspective, like all the startups that you invest in are kind of like your babies, they're like your children. So it's hard to pick your favorite one. But with that said, like, could you maybe name one or two or any of the startups in your portfolio that you want to highlight that's doing really interesting work right now?
Yeah, no, there's many.
Yeah.
But actually we're pretty selective investors, so we don't like spray
Yep.
and pray that
Yep.
things go well. From the past $200 million that we deployed, we only deployed to 25
Wow.
company, so we're pretty active, hands-on
Gotcha.
investor.
Great.
And I'll talk about one or two, but oftentimes we're asked, what sectors do you focus on?
Yep.
Is it purely fintech, purely healthcare, mobility? But we call ourselves focusing on the segments. So people living below $2 a day was our first fund, and then the second fund was up to $6 a day or less. So really focusing on that segment cohort of people, which are the most vulnerable people on planet, especially when the climate changes happen. Disproportionately, like Africa is vulnerable to climate change, droughts, even though they only contribute very, very little, like 2 to 3% of global emissions.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, we focus on that segment. And one maybe really exciting one that I'll bring out is called Bazigo. It's an EV bus company.
Oh, interesting.
When they came to us, I think 2020,
Okay.
they had no buses on the road, just paper of idea.
Okay.
And we invested at seed.
Okay.
And now I think they have 42 buses on the road,
Wow.
or more in Kenya and Rwanda.
Uh,
And they have paid reservations of a couple hundred plus. And this makes sense because Africa has a lot of natural assets. So solar, wind, forest.
Yep.
And in this case, Kenya has 92% renewable energies, mainly geothermal, which means that geothermal can convert to electricity much more affordably than importing fuel or petrol. And I think any kind of macro people will know that emerging markets, not just Africa, but Latin America, we're very, very exposed to macro interest, U.S. interest rates. So when the interest rates go up, like it did in the past 3 years or so, from 0 to like 7.4 or something, that means that like the emerging market currency gets hit. So the cost of importing fuel just hikes.
wow.
But they have the natural assets on their own land. So how do we use technology to convert that and replace a lot of the polluting kind of secondhand trucks from Japan that are kind of spitting up black air? They're called matatus, the buses. These are the main ways of transportation for most of the African people.
Interesting.
But they're polluting massive CO2 emission.
Wow.
So this company has over just past 3-4 years been able to kind of put 40 plus EV buses on the streets of Kenya and Rwanda.
Wow.
And I think they just raised about $42 million Series A, which is the biggest Series A, one of biggest Series A in Africa this year.
That's
so excited
really
about
cool.
them. Many more. But,
Yeah. No, that is truly exciting, man. Because like, are there like EV buses in Japan, in Tokyo? Like, I don't even think so.
Yeah, no, so this is like, I mean, we were chatting earlier a little bit, but I just feel that Japan's a unique market. Like doing VC in Japan, I would find it difficult. Like, I'm not entirely sure or convinced if Japan is the best fit, like structure-wise.
Right.
Like it's too easy to go IPO at Mothers. Like you could go at like 50 to 100 million.
Exactly.
And the reason why Uber has penetrated aggressively in Africa, but was not successful in Japan is because of the taxi companies, the Oji-chans, who are not able to use tech.
Yeah.
So even I think electrification, etc. I think a lot of this kind of innovation in Japan is taking a little bit more time of that kind of the incumbents or the status quo is much more kind of difficult to crack.
Interesting. Because Africa is such a younger market, there's that much opportunity for innovation and disruption that's available compared to more traditional markets like Japan, where there are so many entrenched, interests that's pushing innovation back, ironically, right?
Yeah, so it's interesting your point. Like in Africa, like I use Uber every day in Africa because most of the people can't buy cars, right? So for people in Africa who are average age is 18, they all have smartphones. They have no choice but to use tech.
Interesting.
Like, including Uber.
Wow.
And when you go to Kenya now and open Uber and you order bike transportation, these boda bodas, right?
Yeah, boda.
Yeah, no, I ride these guys all the time. But now the EV bikes are now cheaper than regular bikes.
Interesting.
So the green premium does not work. So these people, like not just in Africa, but like just generally, these people in critical mass that's in the kind of mid to low income people, they're not going to buy, environment friendly goods with a premium to feel better about themselves.
Exactly.
They're only going to buy if it makes economical sense. So this is very different from, New York or London when you're buying like a $15 smoothie, right, to feel better for a day. So it's very different mindset and mentality going in. So the green premium just doesn't really penetrate.
Interesting. Wow. Now I'm kind of like interested about your life in Kenya. Because, I remember when we caught up last time, like you were like, Yoshi, like, Kenya is amazing. Like what you're imagining Kenya as is completely different from what it used to be maybe 10 years, 15 years, right? It's a transformed city. Nairobi is a transformed city. And so I kind of want you to share some of the surprises or some of the things that you found really interesting as you transitioned from life here to Africa.
Oh gosh, yeah. No, thank you. That's a great question. I mean, to be clear, Kenya, I think I know a little bit more than other markets, but Africa, 54 countries. I think the main kind of innovation hub, we call it, is in 4 cities, including Kenya, Nairobi, Lagos, Nigeria, and then Egypt, Cairo, and then South Africa. So this kind of 4 markets make up about 70-80% of total funding.
Wow.
But this is the same with like Silicon Valley, right? Like, it's not. There could be innovation happening in Silicon Valley, but it's going to spread out throughout U.S., right? So in Africa is the same. So it's really about where the people, the hubs of entrepreneurs are together is where innovation happens. But that, ideally, it will scale out to impact the entire continent.
Cool.
With that said, Kenya surprises, oh gosh. First of all, English is like, every day you could use English. It's no problem. I'm pretty shameful, but because everyone speaks so like good English, my Swahili is not.
Oh, I see.
Getting better.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a little bit of kind of history with like colonialism, unfortunately, but there's a lot of kind of English acceptance. What else? I mean, the biggest surprise for me is how talented the entrepreneurs are.
Wow.
Because people who are building EV buses in Africa, it's probably more difficult to build a bus in US or something. It's just the supply chain is broken.
Right.
You're a startup founder, and because the supply chain is not there, non-existent, you have to start from scratch. So my colleague Steve, he always says you have to build not just a bus, but the rails that the bus will ride on.
Interesting.
So naturally, it's a little bit more CapEx heavy. Takes a little bit of time. So the J curve, as we say it in venture capital, is looks different.
Interesting.
The S looks a little bit different. But once these founders are able to figure it out, then they have no competition. There's a big defensive moat that competitors can't kind of come in to crack. So it's an interesting dynamic. Like Silicon Valley, these like asset like SaaS is like, burn capital, invest, build a technology, asset light.
Exactly.
And then the margin starts to come down because the competitors will come in. Africa, it's slightly like different timing of scale. So it's pretty interesting.
面白い. Interesting. Wow, it's super insightful. So I'm sure that you've found challenges along the way, right? And when I say challenges, I'm talking about challenges in your career, in your professional life, but also in Novastar Ventures, like professionally in Kenya. Could you maybe highlight or share some of the challenges that you've faced so far in your career and how you were able to overcome them?
Yeah, actually, that's a good question. My biggest struggle, I think, was 2 parts. It's like, I think my first couple years of career, I actually kind of had to change jobs a couple times because of kind of didn't really fit the culture. I actually had like a health issue as well.
Wow. Oh no.
I debated whether to go back to the US or stay. Actually, my parents suggested that I go back and take a break or rest.
Oh, interesting.
But I was either kind of too stupid or too stubborn. I thought I could kind of do it again and somehow succeed. Unfortunately, when I joined JP Morgan was probably the inflection point. I did 3 years at JP as institutional sales, which I think was probably the prime for my career during my 20s. I mean, it was a good team, good fit, but more than anything, I was very, very fortunate with my clients. Like my clients really, I feel like raised me and taught me, which I still have very close relationships with. But then the second kind of struggle was that time when I left Morgan Stanley. There was 2 years of kind of soul searching. And there's a famous quote by a Spanish poet that my team has in their presentation called like saying, "Traveler, there's no path. The path is only made by walking." Which means that when you're going to a new frontier market and there's no precedence, you have to be a little bit weird. You have to be a little bit stupid, but not know that you're stupid, and then just kind of go and so that 2 years was a little bit of a struggle because I'll catch up with people and people will be like, "Oh, what are you up to?" And I just don't have an answer. And it's hard to meet up with people as well because if you feel bad because they want to be helpful, but you don't know how they can be helpful.
Right.
So that was a little bit of a struggling phase, and then it really kind of turned when I was able to kind of meet Novastar. I had several Japanese companies telling me, well, actually this is public, so I could say it. So SBI.
Nice.
So shouts out to the boys at SBI, Shohei and Koshi. So they were like, "Riki, we'll invest in wherever you go."
Wow.
So we trust in you.
Wow.
So we got you. And then I had another company called Shosen Mitsui, which is Mitsui OSK.
Okay.
They were similar.
Wow.
So that was very, very encouraging.
Yeah.
And then we announced that partnership with SBI and Novastar last year.
Nice.
I think when I met you last time.
Yep, that's right.
Of $40 million into Novastar, which was the largest commitment to an African VC in the history of African VC, which is only 10 years. But
that's crazy.
So maybe to kind of wrap, it was a lot of the learnings were like at the lowlights, not the highlights. And it was who was there for me at that time, who I think really are kind of close to me now.
That's cool. That's amazing. Thanks for sharing that, man. Because I remember, not the last time we caught up, but the last time, I think it was a couple years back, when we were, I think Toranomon. It was probably 2020. I had just started Saturday Kids. I was running Saturday Kids. And then I remember when we met up, you had so much passion. You were like, "Yeah, I'm going to create this impact fund," but at the same time, I remember that you didn't really know where you wanted to direct all of that passion to, right?
Yeah.
So I can definitely I can definitely recall that moment. But it's amazing to see where you've come since then. So it's really cool.
Yeah, no, that was good times. Yeah. First, when I dove in, there's no textbook. There's no manual of doing venture, at least that I had access to.
Exactly.
So I think the first 2 years, I literally had to make my own presentations.
Wow.
And it was never a pitch.
Yeah.
But I spent a good time, more than a year, really trying to bring more transparency and trust to the continent, not pitching.
Yeah.
Going to Japanese companies, the most conservative society, I think, is and asking them to invest into venture in Africa. By the way, VCs are 10-year commitment, so
that's right.
It was a tough sell, but I think now we're in a much better state, being able to kind of showcase actual evidences of innovation, climate resilience, in an impactful way. So the 25 companies that we invested, actually the users is about 70 million, of which most are middle, low income.
Wow.
So 70 million is just a drop in a bucket for Africa, but that's more than half the population of Japan.
Exactly.
Imagine if we could do that with 200 million.
Yeah.
Imagine all those people at traditional banks and hedge funds. I had 200 million was a tier 3 client at that time.
Wow.
Because there's guys running 3 billion or so. So how do we kind of move the needle to maybe unlock a little bit of those types of capital to where we play and venture. So really, for me, as someone coming from finance, it's again, doing VC in Africa is not just about feeling sorry and coming from a high horse. But creating this as a proper venture asset class, that's probably the most highest impact, highest growth asset class left in the capital market.
Wow.
That's the big dream.
Very cool, man. Yeah. I mean, that's impact at scale, right? I mean, that's really a lot of respect for you, man. And I think, it really speaks to you as a person. And with a lot of Japanese companies, like it's relationship building is tough. It's tough.
Yeah.
There's a lot of a lot of trust building that you have to do, right?
Oh yeah.
And I think that it was really the years of work that you committed to this process that gave them that allowed them to entrust you with their capital, which you're now deploying. So
100%.
Yeah.
So I'm here kind of pretending like I did all this on my own, but seriously, it's like thanks to the team at Novastar, like amazing team. Especially the founders and the partners who've been doing this
Wow.
from scratch.
Oh wow.
And yeah, I can't take credit for what they've done.
Right,
So
right.
shouts out. And on the investor side, and to us, a lot of these companies, so SBI, Shosen Mitsui,
Yep.
these people I knew even before, like Novastar, especially, but like one of the guys at SBI was my intern, actually.
Oh, no way.
Straight out of university. And then he went to SBI and he was able to do this.
Okay.
The other guy at SBI who really drove this,
Right.
he was at a different company.
Okay.
But then when he went to SBI, this was the first thing he wanted to do.
Interesting.
So yeah, and there's another person who I went to similar high school with.
Well,
So I have like in each company, people really help champion
wow.
inside. So those are the real heroes.
Wow.
And I get to take a lot of the credit for it.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
but all seriousness, I was very fortunate. But you're right. Like it's how to kind of maneuver and navigate the Japanese companies. You need someone from the outside that could be trusted, but also that kind of collaboration with
like
the
an
certain
internal
people, the
champion.
champions,
Exactly.
was critical.
Very cool. Very cool. Wow. All right. So now I kind of want to transition into, let's see, the why, right? So before we jump into insights and reflections, I kind of want to ask you, like, Ricky, like, why do you do this? Like, why are you so passionate about impact? Like, what gets you up in the morning? Like, how do you keep moving forward? Like, you spend months at a time alone in a faraway continent where, I imagine you probably didn't have a lot of friends to start off with. But where does this passion come from, man?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. First of all, I have a little bit of a guilt trip during my 20s.
Okay,
like
okay.
I'm serving hedge funds was fun.
Okay.
But I just had that little bit of kind of a guilt.
Interesting.
I mean, the first investments that I made in Africa, like small tickets,
Yep.
were because a lot of the money that I made at investment banks, like I wanted to like get rid of that money.
Get rid of that money.
I think I partially blame, so I was job hunting, 2012,
Okay.
13. That's
Okay.
when Wolf of Wall Street, the movie came out.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I had the wrong motivation. I mean, a lot of that movie is like inflated.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not
yeah.
like
Definitely.
truthful,
It's-
but
no.
it gave me the wrong motivation.
Yeah.
And that was during my 20s.
Yep.
I learned a lot, but then also had that mindset of wanting to kind of give back
Yep.
and change things
Yep.
for the next generations
Right.
to come.
Right.
And then quite frankly, having a name card with a big investment bank was good.
Yep.
But now without that name card,
Mm.
we're a big company name, but you can really kind of be your independence
Yep.
and have a little bit of more say and
Mm.
influence. And hopefully what I get up morning and hope for
Yeah.
is kind of going back to like making this the high as an asset class,
Yeah.
established asset class
I see.
that's more accessible
Mm.
to traditional asset owners, pension funds.
Mm.
Japan is going to have like what, 200 trillion of from high net worth,
Okay.
and GPIF is sitting on like 90 trillion.
Okay.
If 0.1% of that could be reallocated to what we're doing, if we could impact 70 million people with 200 million,
Yeah.
just kind of thinking about in context what we could do for climate and
Yeah.
for emerging markets,
Right.
that's kind of my drive.
Cool. Cool.
But again, it's a very, very, it's Africa. There is corruption. There's macro headwinds.
Yep.
It is a fragile market. So I
Right.
think we have to make sure that we handle with care
Yeah.
and build trust, not just go for like the quick money
Right.
in and out,
Right.
because that's really going to be not probably longer term,
Yeah.
sustainable for the ecosystem.
Nice. Nice. Definitely. All right. Awesome, man. Well, so I want to now jump into sort of insights and reflections now. So let's talk about your learnings, right? So I'm sure that you've grown in so many ways as an individual and also as a professional. As you reflect back on your professional, your personal or professional growth in the past, like what would you say were some of the key growth areas or things that you learned along the way?
Uh, yeah, I think during my 20s, I was almost kind of like burnout.
Oh, okay.
Like
I've
every
been there.
morning,
I've been there. Yeah.
especially if you're in the stock market, like
Yep.
7 a.m. Market opens at 9 every day,
Yep.
closes at 3 every day,
Yeah.
and then drinks with clients every day.
Yeah.
And then you just get kind of stuck in that cycle.
I see.
So like one of the learnings is trying to balance that,
Yep.
because it's not sustainable.
Yep.
But in that moment in time, you feel that there's so much, like energies, you're getting results,
Yep.
you're getting paid based on those
Yep.
results. So you think you keep doing that,
Yep.
but kind of stop and reflect, because I think at that time I was not talking to a lot of my friends, not contacting my parents, family. So I think that could be pretty dangerous. And I would definitely kind of, if I could go back, change that.
Oh, for sure.
Um,
For sure.
yeah, I guess that would be the major one.
Cool. Cool. No, thanks for being honest, man. Yeah, 'cause as I'm on this entrepreneurship journey as well.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I got to remind myself to, spend time with important people in my life. It's so easy to just say, hey, I'm so busy right now. Let's just meet next month, or 2 months from now. But I got to be like, oh, wait, like this person, somebody's important. Like, let's just make 30 minutes of coffee time with them. Let's do that, And it's so important to just balance that with work.
Yeah,
right?
no, I agree. It could be like the industry itself as well. It could be toxic because,
Yeah.
like, if you're working in certain investment banks and stuff, there's a lot of compliance. You can't say stuff outside. You're not really exposed in social media, so we wouldn't be able to do this.
That's true. That's true.
There's a lot of insider information that can be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
That's right.
Then I think what's unfortunate is, like, there's a lot of regulations that came into the industry right after Lehman shock.
I see.
So that made it really, really difficult.
I see.
I think still it is difficult for the industry, to be honest. So everyone has to kind of go like heads down and don't ask questions,
Right.
and then need to be more conservative rather than
Right.
taking risks. Like that was our job, to take
Right.
risks, but now
Right.
it's kind of going the other way. And then also, the more you succeed and go up the ladder, and you're gonna make a lot of enemies. Like you have to be prepared to be stabbed in the back by people on your same team
Wow.
because it's up or
Wow.
out.
Wow.
And then as you go up the career ladder, you have to be more and more probably political as well. And I don't think I would have been able to play that.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't be good at it. Yeah, so just kind of like reflections.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Interesting. If you were to go through this same journey again, okay, what would you do differently?
Yeah.
Are there things that you want to change, or are you perfectly happy with how everything went? I mean, looking at the result, it seems like things went really well for you. But if there was one or two things you wanted to change in the past, like what would those things be?
Yeah, no, if I was in that same situation again, I think I wouldn't be able to do it. Like, again, I think you have to be a little bit dumb or stubborn or stupid to. What would I have done? I mean, it would have been much better probably to make it a more smoother transitions.
Yep.
But sometimes you just gotta kind of take that first step
Yep.
to be bold.
Yep.
So I think it was inevitable, but like, yeah, I think there could have been much more care. And I think, yeah, maybe like depending on people more.
Okay.
I think I was kind of a little bit kind of stuck in a box,
Okay.
not able to ask for help.
I see.
Because it felt like it was a little bit of a sign of like insecurity, or
Yeah, especially in the finance world, like it's a very macho kind of world out there, So
yeah, I mean you gotta flex.
yeah, you gotta flex. Yeah.
And like stay confident. So yeah, I think those are things maybe
Cool.
that would have done differently.
Thanks for being honest. All right. Well, for advice for aspiring change makers, So Riki, you've been there, you've done that. But for people who are listening today to this podcast, who are thinking of, taking a huge risk like you, or maybe even starting their own, social impact venture, right? What advice or tips would you have for them today? And these can be, maybe young people based here in Tokyo or Japan, or maybe even those who are based in the continent in Africa. For anyone.
Yeah. No, I think I try to speak at universities sometimes to kind of get more kind of contact with like those students and younger generations, because I mean, Koshi, the guy at SBI who was my intern at like three years ago or something, like he was looking for opportunities in Africa VC, but there just isn't any.
Oh, I see.
So I think there's a lot of interest in goodwill from a lot of the younger generations, but there's just not opportunities. Like especially if they join a traditional company, and they have to kind of do that kind of traditional way of career and do shinsotsu and training and stuff. I feel a little bit like mottainai. So my encouragement is kind of reach out. Social media is much more kind of accessible. If there are people who I think are doing something that might be interesting, I really encourage to kind of reach out.
Cool.
Because I think there is that kind of gap of job opportunities, especially in what is kind of most aligned with the people in the next generation.
Yeah. I mean, I know, Riki, he might have intimidating face, kind of like me, but he's a very approachable guy, people. So, and when he says like reach out, like he's not lying. Like he really means, reach out. And he's a great senpai, and he's really taking care of a lot of people under his wings. So please feel free to definitely reach out to Riki. Okay, so in terms of future endeavors, like what's next on the horizon for you personally, or even for Novastar? Like any exciting news you want to share with everyone?
Yeah, thanks. I can't speak for entire Novastar, but we're very excited with we're now up and running with our Fund 3 that's focusing a little bit about how do we address the climate resilience for the mass population in Africa.
Cool.
So we're pretty excited about that. I think for me personally, I think it's really important to show evidences of what we're doing.
Okay.
Because I think a lot of kind of VCs and even government and corporates, there's a lot of promises that are kind of open promises around impact or innovation. Like we've been hearing the same thing for about the past 10 years, I feel, and no one's really kind of fact checking or calling people out.
Right.
And for us, we're very focused on evidences.
Nice.
And showing kind of proof points of being able to find intersections of finance, innovation, and impact.
Cool.
And it's not mutually exclusive to each other. It's kind of our kind of goal, a personal goal, I think.
Cool.
Okay.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Riki. I learned so much from you today, and kind of, in a way, made me sort of realize the scale and the impact that you personally is making. Like you're allocating like millions, hundreds of millions of dollars into this space, and the impact that you're making is just phenomenal, And I think it really comes from the years of, I guess, hardship, but also the tough experiences that you've had that shaped who you are and the values that you hold dear to your heart. That's really directing this capital to make a positive impact in this world. So I really congratulate you for that. And I really respect you. And I'm really honored to be able to call you my kohai and somebody who I also look up to highly. So
thank you, son. I appreciate the opportunity. And yeah, you're right. I think it's a big mission, but it's a life work.
It is.
It is. And I think back to the younger generation part, I want to give a lot of credit to the people who have really championed, because a lot of them actually are like 20s and 30s.
Oh wow!
So for them too, it's a collective win.
Nice
for us, and nice. I'm glad that we've done it in our generation.
Yep. Exactly.
And so we could turn around the narrative.
Nice. Very, very cool, man. Young generation's coming, guys. Watch out. All right. So with that, I just want to conclude. So I want to say to all of our listeners, if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and share. We'll be back with more stories of impact very, very soon. So remember, coffee friends, the power to create change is in your hands. Keep leading the way, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Let's keep brewing change, one cup of coffee at a time. Thank you.